Dublin, the capital city of Southern Ireland and the home of its government, is the largest city in Ireland. Dublin, by virtue of its size, stands out dramatically in what is a largely rural country. Almost 1 million people live in Dublin. This doesn't sound a lot until you consider it's almost 1/3 of the entire population. Situated in Dublin Bay, next to the Irish Sea, this beautiful city has many sights to offer the visitor, sights both modern and historical. This contradiction of the old and the new is what's most endearing about Dublin. It was the mixing of the peat-coloured waters of the River Poddle and the River Liffey, the river which flows through the centre of Dublin, that gave rise to its name. But the original Celtic name for Dublin, and still its official name, was Béal Atacliath, which means Town of the Hurdle Ford, a small river crossing that still exists today. Dublin itself is a very old place. In ancient times, the Greek philosopher Ptolemy mentioned Dublin when it was called Eblana. Then the area was settled by Christian Celts in and around monastic settlements. The Vikings arrived around 840 AD and used Dublin as a base for their expeditions and raids. It is then that the city began its rise to a prosperous port, trading with the rest of Europe. In 1169, Dermot MacMurrough, the King of Leinster, asked Henry II of England for his help. He needed help to get rid of the Vikings in order to reinforce his kingship of Ireland. The Anglo-Norman army invaded and soon wiped out the Viking threat. The problem was that they were so successful in doing this that they didn't want to leave. It would be 700 years before they left. The Anglo-Normans fortified themselves with strong castles, such as Dublin Castle. Most of the castle was destroyed by fire in 1684, but parts of it date back to the original Norman castle of 1202. Since the fire of 1684, the castle has had numerous buildings added to it. Throughout its history, the castle has been used for a variety of purposes. The British Viceroy's apartments, a prison, the Irish crown jewels were even held here. They were held in Bedford Tower until they were stolen from here in 1907. Today, Dublin is a colorful, musical, and modern city. Elegant architecture, smart restaurants, fashionable shops, and a huge variety of pubs exist side by side with grand and historic buildings. Walking down a Dublin street could just as easily lead you to the hustle and bustle of the busy city life, or a quiet little square with just the birds for company. Dublin has many Georgian streets and buildings. These were built during the boom years of the 18th century, and they rival the best Georgian architecture that Scotland or England can offer. By the standards at that time, Dublin was a huge place, with only the city of London being any bigger. the planning and building of the Georgian Dublin was orchestrated by a commission set up in 1757. This was called the Commission for Making Wide and Convenient Streets. They probably would have made them a little wider if they could have foreseen the arrival of buses and trucks. It's easy to see why many figures of literature have been inspired by the busy streets of Dublin. All around the city are reminders of the great writers that were born or lived there: Bernard Shaw, W.B. Yeats, Samuel Beckett, Jonathan Swift, James Joyce, and Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was born in Westland Row and graduated from nearby Trinity College a few years behind Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula. Indeed, the list of graduates from the college is mightily impressive. Founded by Elizabeth I in 1592, the students who have walked through the 2 million volumes that are stored in the Long Room include Oliver Goldsmith, Samuel Beckett, and Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift is best remembered for writing Gulliver's Travels. He was the dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and it was probably in the deanery that he completed Gulliver's Travels. Jonathan Swift lies buried in this great and imposing cathedral. St. Patrick's Cathedral is the national cathedral and the largest church in Ireland. It stands on one of the oldest Christian sites in Ireland, believed to date back to the 5th century, and St. Patrick himself is said to have blessed converts at a well within the grounds. The current building dates back to the 12th century and was restored in 1864 after surviving storms, 2 fires, and the indignity of being converted to a stable by Cromwell in 1649. Another piece of Irish inheritance is, of course, the pubs. And nowhere in Ireland will you find more pubs than in Dublin. Even great historical figures spent a lot of their time in Dublin pubs. Figures such as James Joyce, who immortalized Dublin in Ulysses, and Patrick Kavanagh could be found frequenting the many pubs of Dublin. The pubs of today are the same as they were in those days: lively, noisy, and musical. The quality of music you will find in most Irish pubs is truly outstanding. You don't have to go far to hear traditional Irish songs being played with all the passion and feeling that was originally intended when they were first written all those years ago. Part of this important inheritance is, of course, what is drunk in these pubs, clearly shown by this typical Irish saying.
Sláinte. In Ireland, there's an old Irish expression: can steal another man's wife, never water his whiskey.
However, the most famous drink of them all is, of course, stout, in particular, Guinness. Stout is a beer, which is dark in color because the barley from which it is made is roasted. This technique was brought to Ireland by the Cork brewers Beamish and Crawford. Guinness has since become synonymous with this dark brew throughout the world, although Murphy's and Beamish can also be found in many Irish pubs. The Guinness Brewery was founded by Arthur Guinness in 1759 at St. James Gate on the River Liffey. It grew quickly in popularity, with the first export orders leaving the brewery in 1769. And by the early 19th century, the dark brew was on sale all over the world. The Guinness Brewery is still the world's largest stout brewery, producing over 2.5 million pints per day, still using the same strain of yeast originally selected by Arthur Guinness all those years ago. The recipe has always remained the same: Irish-grown barley, soft water, hops, and yeast. Water from the River Liffey was once a vital ingredient in Guinness, but you will be relieved to know that this is no longer the case. Today, visitors can take a tour around the brewery, sampling the sights, sounds, smells, and taste of one of the most famous and well-known brands in the world, even appearing in literary classics such as Alice in Wonderland. "What are the lion and the unicorn fighting for?" asked Alice. "They both want a Guinness," said the king, "and there's only one left." "Does the one that wins get the Guinness?" asked Alice. "Dear me, no," said the king. "The one that had the Guinness wins." Like many of the great cities of the world, Dublin is built upon a river. The River Liffey flows down to Dublin from the Wicklow Hills, passing the huge Phoenix Park and flowing under 14 city bridges before reaching Dublin Harbour and Dublin Bay. For much of its length, the Liffey is like a small country stream, even through Phoenix Park, before opening up as it gets nearer to the city centre. There have been bridges over the River Liffey for over 800 years. The oldest of these, still standing, is the Liam Mellows Bridge, which was originally built in 1768. The River Pottle, or the Black Pool, which gives the city of Dublin its name, runs mainly underground, trickling into the River Liffey through a grating just south of the bridge. Despite the Black Pool flowing into the Liffey, you can often see many fish swimming about in the waters below. The best views of the river in the city are from O'Connell Bridge, or the Halfpenny Bridge. The Halfpenny Bridge, or rather the Halfpenny Bridge, is the only pedestrian bridge in Dublin. It was built in 1816, and it leads the visitor to the exciting Temple Bar area of town. It's one of the earliest cast iron structures of its kind in Ireland. Officially called the Liffey Bridge, it became known as the Halfpenny Bridge after the toll charged to all its users. The other route is over the humpback O'Connell Bridge, opened to traffic in 1880. At that time, it was lit by gas lamps, with horse trams pulling huge groups of visitors across the bridge. Nowadays, huge groups of visitors still travel across the very busy O'Connell Bridge. One of the most exciting parts of Dublin is the area known as Temple Bar. In the 17th century, it was named Temple Bar after a previous owner, Sir William Temple. A one-time thriving business district is now a vibrant, pedestrianized place. The district started to really grow and develop in the 1980s. The narrow and cobbled alleyways are still here, but now it is also the home of cafes, ethnic restaurants, jazz, folk music, and even classical music. The music plays late into the night. All tastes are catered for. Whether you are exploring the many restaurants or listening out for the latest sounds that filter through the streets of this very unconventional and bohemian quarter of Dublin. Kilmainham Jail is an important centre of Irish history. It was opened in 1796, shortly before the Act of the Union abolished the Irish Parliament. It was finally closed in 1924, when Ireland became a free state. The opening and closing of this jail more or less coincided with the making and breaking of the union between Great Britain and Ireland. During those intervening years, the jail was like a political barometer. The uprisings of 1799, 1803, 1848, 1867, and 1916 all saw its leaders imprisoned at some time or other in Kilmainham Jail. Now the jail is empty of prisoners, but it remains filled with history. It has often been called the Irish Bastille because, like its French counterpart, it became such an important symbol of the Revolution. Walking through this vast building, the largest unoccupied jail in Europe, it is easy to feel the presence of prisoners long dead. Prisons then were, of course, very different to those today. If the prisoner or his family were rich, they could afford several rooms, fully furnished, and all the food and drink he could want. He could even move his family in with him. If the prisoner were poor, then he would end up living in squalor on the brink of starvation. The prisoners were even allowed to beg in the streets to contribute towards their keep. Within the walls, male, female, and child offenders mixed freely. The law made no distinction between children and adults. Taking a tour around the jail is a memorable experience, touching the lives of the many people that created modern Irish history. Kilmainham Jail offers a unique and profound insight into some of the aspects that help shape the modern Ireland. Situated in the west of Dublin is Phoenix Park. The name Phoenix Park is actually a corruption of the Irish words for clear water, Fiannes. It is one of the world's largest parks, covering over 700 acres. It dwarfs Central Park in New York and all the parks in London. There are gardens, lakes, a zoo, and even a dueling place. An area of the park known as the 15 Acres was well known in the 18th century for a place that gentlemen could go and carry out their duels. This area of land is now used as playing fields. Instead of the sound of musket and swords, it is now the sound of children's laughter that sounds in the trees. It is ironic and typical of Ireland that even playing fields are not without their very own history. Another part in Dublin is St. Stephen's Green. As it is situated in the middle of Dublin, It's a very popular place for office workers to enjoy their lunch breaks. The park is entered by walking under Fusilier's Arch. A copy of the Arch of Titus in Rome, it was erected to commemorate Irish soldiers who fought in the 1899 Boer War. St. Stephen's Park was the center of fashion in the 18th century, but then became a private park with people being charged 1 guinea to enter. A short time later, Sir Arthur Edward Guinness rushed through an Act of Parliament which once again made St. Stephen's Green a public place. The gardens were laid out and paid for by Sir Arthur Edward Guinness himself in 1880. There are flower gardens, ornamental lakes, and waterfowl within its 9 acres of grounds. Music drifts through the statues and trees from the round bandstands that play with lunchtime concerts. Adjoining this beautiful park is the St. Stephen's Green Shopping Mall, a huge structure. It's like walking through an old greenhouse filled with all kinds of shops and restaurants. An equally impressive but considerably older building is Custom House. Situated downstream from O'Connell Bridge, this magnificent building was built between 1781 and 1791 by the architect James Gandon. Built on marshy ground, Custom House floats on a fragile platform of wooden planks alongside the River Liffey. During the Battle for Independence in 1921, the building was almost destroyed by fire. It is only recently that it has been restored to its former glory. On the opposite side of the river is the Irish Museum of Modern Art. It was once the Royal Hospital. Commissioned by Charles II, it was designed by William Robinson in 1684. Charles II wanted it to be on a grand scale, classical, yet continental in style. No expense was spared. He wanted a home for his pensioner soldiers, but equally wanted a building that would mark the starting of Dublin's rise into a city of European standing. Like so much of Dublin, this building symbolizes what Dublin was in the past, what it is today, and what it wants to be in the future. A city with energy and ambition. Dublin has once again become a great European city, a busy modern place with its colorful history never far away.